Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy Franklin here, and today I wanted to do a little cool video. This is just strictly on competitive Pokemon, so if you're not really a fan of that, well, stay tuned because I'm going to talk about the top 3 Pokemon that I hate playing against in today's metagames. Now, obviously, we had one big metagame shift in regards to the introduction of Pokemon Home. So a lot of Pokemon's viabilities have gone up and others have gone down into very crazy tiers that I would never believe I would see a Pokemon in a very low tier, like Blissey, which is insane. Um, these top 3 Pokemon are based on my experience from playing on Showdown, particularly in the Overused, because that's one of the more balanced metagames. Obviously, I'm not going to go based on my Wi-Fi battles because there's basically no man's land when it comes to Wi-Fi battles. I've seen the crazy teams that people want to put me up against, and I don't think it's fair to put that experience compared to a more official, unofficial, whatever you like to call it, and more balanced and organized competitive format. So here are the top 3, and I'm gonna start off with a pretty good offensive Pokemon, and that is Iron Valiant. Now, Iron Valiant is a very interesting Pokemon. The fact that this Pokemon is physically capable of just being an offensive Pokemon and having a lot of special attack as well. So you can be either physically offensive or especially offensive. Uh, it's typing. I mean, right off the bat, Fairy and Fighting is phenomenal, especially with the moves that it has. It has Moonblast, Aura Sphere, Close Combat, Spirit Break. It's just nutty. Like, it has a very wide move pool. But the thing that really makes this Pokemon just so good on its own is its ability in tandem with booster energy. So most of the times we're going to see this Pokemon have a +1 in speed. And that's what I've seen in the current trends of OU metagames. Iron Valiant has the capability of being a setup sweeper. On the wrong time, this Pokemon comes in and you're locked into like a choice band or choice specs, and this Pokemon doesn't care, for example, like Dragon type moves, it's going to set up on you. And it's going to get nasty. Now, let me show you guys a replay here, real quick, just to show you how crazy this Pokemon can be. So there you have it. I got one interesting replay. Obviously, I'm using a hyper offensive team. My opponent is using like a pretty much a cool offensive, balanced offensive, bulky offense team right there. But if you look at the matchup, like my Iron Valiant, maybe outside of the Landros, like it annihilates my opponent's team. And then looking my opponent's Iron Valiant, yeah, it kind of destroys me as well. Of course, how you play this Pokemon is up to you, and we're gonna go through it very quickly. I'm gonna show replays of the 3 Pokemon that I have categorized as the most hated. I hate playing as these kind of Pokemon. So obviously, Iron Valiant benefits a lot from hazard stacking, so that's why I kind of have a Gilmora. Shout out to the person who made this team. I don't recollect who had this team built, so shout outs to them. Once you get rid of the bulkier Pokemon that Iron Valiant kind of struggles to deal with first, it gets pretty damn nasty. It's able to set up on you, and it just becomes very, very annoying. I don't know why opponent is clicking Earthquake here. I think it's because they don't want to activate the balloon, which, kudos to them. So I'm kind of baiting my opponent into going into the exact Dragapult because obviously my opponent doesn't have other switch-ins. So they go for the Draco Meteor, and this is actually pretty cool. If you know metagame trends, obviously you know this Dragapult is most likely going to be choice specs because, one, obviously Dragapults nowadays either are choice banded, they could be leftovers, they could be life orb. Very rarely they'll be choice scarf because the speed creep isn't really necessary. I know based on his team composition, I actually do have a copy of this team with me. I know it's choice specs. So using that metagame knowledge, I can go either right into my Hatterene or go into Iron Valiant. If I go into Hatterene, it most likely is going to mean that King Gambit or Iron Tread is going to come in to play. If I go into my Iron Valiant, I get the +1 speed and I get the speed creep on everything and I get to set up on it. So that's what I do. End up going to Iron Valiant here, and I know it's choice locked, so that's why I go for the Swords Dance here, and he's just gonna have to attack. I could get up another Swords Dance if I want to, but you know what? I'm not gonna get greedy on the off chance he does switch out, and there you go. It was choice specs. Goes into the Iron Treads, and don't forget, even though Iron Tread is actually quite bulky, the problem with Iron Valiant at +2 is that it gets the stab boost in close combat, and usually nowadays Iron Treads are mostly special attackers, which is very interesting. So they don't have a lot of defensive investment. So doing the calculations, I know close combat is straight up going to kill. That's what I end up going for and just annihilate this thing pretty quickly. So now I'm in a good position. And obviously, I won the battle because my opponent forfeits. But even if my opponent decided to pull off a comeback, they'd have to risk the speed tie with Iron Valiant, which, you know, based on the Pokemon gods out there, they're going to let me win that speed tie, and I straight up murder the Iron Valiant. If they go into Excalibur, the best thing they can do is honestly just Ice Shard, and I'll take a decent amount of damage because I am at -1 defense, but I'm going to obliterate it with Spirit Break. And then obviously King Gambit. King Gambit is not really a threat anymore because the Terra has already been used up, and Sucker Punch isn't going to kill me. It could kill me, but now the issue is that my opponent has absolutely nothing for Galarian Moltres, and I do have my own Dragapult and Hatterene, and I haven't even used my own Terra, so my opponent just pretty much just forfeits there. But it goes to show that a lot of teams nowadays, I would say they're not really prepared for Iron Valiant, or they're just built poorly to the point that because there's so much variance in the metagame, that Iron Valiant just straight up murders teams. And another cool tech of Iron Valiant itself is Encore. Encore basically is a disrupting move that prevents setup sweepers from doing their thing. It prevents the fat, bulkier Pokemon from, doing what they need to do. Encore is just a blessing in disguise for this Pokemon. I think it might be borderline crazy that the fact it gets +1 speed, it gets the speed jump on a lot of fast Pokemon, and just straight up Encore or just starts setting up, and it's pretty much GG. I've noticed a lot of teams nowadays just don't not prepare themselves for Iron Valiant. So pretty interesting. At number 2, we got Garganacl. I hate this Pokemon so much. It's one of those fat Pokemon that it just doesn't die. Now, there's two very interesting features of this Pokemon that I completely hate about it. Absolutely hate about this Pokemon. One, its ability. Purifying Salt prevents this Pokemon from getting statused. It cannot get burned. It cannot get paralyzed. You cannot throw a Toxic on it. It doesn't work. You can still pull a trick on it. You can still, try to swap its items out. I mean, this Pokemon just doesn't die. It's just that simple. It's bulky. It doesn't take status whatsoever. And also, its signature move, Salt Cure. Salt Cure, I think, is unbalanced, and I think it's probably the reason why people have been complaining about this Pokemon being gone from the OU metagame. It just refuses to die. And if you think you're trying to get it, its HP down, you got to worry about your own HP because Salt Cure obviously takes damage every turn. But if you are a water, if you are a ghost, you're steel, it's like, Jesus Christ, this thing, nah, bro. Nah, man, it's just insane. Also got another replay to show you guys as well. Alrighty, so we got ourselves here. I'm the one that's actually going against Garganacl, and you can see my team doesn't really do well against it. And you got to find out how crazy defensive this Pokemon is. I'm actually going to skip the turns here. You don't have to see all this, but essentially I'm just trying to get hazards up. I'm trying to blow by this Zamazenta, which I think it's a broken Pokemon too. But whatever. I'm trying to lower the Slowking's HP. I go into this Pokemon. Now here comes the shenanigans. Garganacl, like I said, it's just bulky as hell. It refuses to die. Look how much that Razor Shell does. And I am actually max attack. It only did half, which is insane. So obviously the Garganacl is going to protect her. I get my Swords Dance out because you know what? I'm not playing with this Pokemon anymore. But unfortunately, because of Salt Cure, I simply just die because I got no chance because Salt Cure. It does more damage, again, to the types that I already mentioned. It just becomes more annoying to deal with. And especially, I hate dealing with Pokemon that are fat and just simply don't die. And especially those that have access to, like, Roost and Recover. They're just not really balanced to me overall in today's metagame. And I'm just going to skip turns here as well because, you don't have to see all of this. But look, now this Garganacl goes Terra Water. Terra Water and Fairy are like the most common terrestrialization types this Pokemon will use. I throw off a Shadow Ball, right? And you also got to remember that this Pokemon's ability enables it to take less damage from Ghost type attacks. So you think Golden Go is a pretty good counter for this Pokemon? Nah, bro. It's just the complete opposite. This Pokemon just doesn't die. Look at the Salt Cure damage as well. Insane. So it kind of forces me to start recovering. And you're going to start seeing this Garganacl just becoming more more annoying. Obviously, one of the best counters to Garganacl is a Golden Go with a Covert Cloak or any Pokemon in general that can just deal with this Pokemon from the get go. But then again, it's kind of hard to deal with a fat Pokemon that does this kind of nonsense. Even at +5 special attack, it only does 64. Of course, I get lucky with the special defense drop, whatever. So I'm predicting my opponent going to protect. Got to recover because I'm not trying to lose all this HP, you know? So I'll go for the Shadow Ball, and I finally obliterate my opponent. And there you have it. It's just that simple, right? No, this Pokemon just refuses to die. And even with the supposed counter like Golden Go, it just, nah, doesn't. This Pokemon's unfair. I hate like again, I just completely hate fat Pokemon that can recover and just start breaking your team down one by one while doing absolutely nothing, just sitting there menacingly. Okay, so now I got some honorable mentions. I'm gonna put the unaware Pokemon from this generation: Dondozo, Clodsire, and Skeledurgi. I don't know how to pronounce that, so forgive me. It's the fire, starter. Skeledurgi. Sorry, I just butchered its name. I don't know how to honestly say it. But unaware Pokemon, yeah, they're annoying as hell. And yes, they have recovery. The problem with unaware Pokemon is that they're kind of reliant on terrestrialization. And if you see a Pokemon with unaware, most likely your opponent's going to depend on not getting swept, right? And it kind of reveals the terra planning very early. Like if I see, for example, Dondozo, most likely it's going to be either fairy, it's going to be dark. If it's Clodsire, it could be dark, it could be ground, it could be something that can deal with potential common sweepers. Usually, fairy, Terra Fairy in general is like the most defensive Terra typing the unaware Pokemon can use. The issue with unaware Pokemon, however, and the reason why they're not in my top three is because Pokemon that have photosynthesis and Pokemon with Quark Drive, so essentially, the Paradox Pokemon, those are actually not affected by unaware. In addition, there's a new item called Ability Shield, and essentially Pokemon setup sweepers, like let's say for example you have a Roaring Moon and wants a Dragon Dance in front of a Dondozo. Essentially with the Ability Shield, it prevents unaware from affecting your Pokemon. So that means it can just straight up destroy everything. And there's also Mold Breaker Pokemon that can ignore unaware, but they're pretty hard to come by. Like literally the only Pokemon I can think of that has any type of metagame relevance with Mold Breaker is like Hawlucha, and Hawlucha is very niche. So yeah, unaware users, they're right there. Oh boy, here we go. The number one most annoying Pokemon to play against. Drumroll please, and it's gonna be the one and only. Yeah, that's right. It's King Gambit. Now, there's been a lot of discussion with the OU peeps from what I've seen in the threads of Smogon OU. People actually want this Pokemon banned, or at least a suspect test. I think Quick Ban is way too harsh for this Pokemon, but a lot of people are pointing at this Pokemon and be like, yo, this Pokemon's not healthy. This Pokemon has no business of being in a metagame where they try to promote balanced and fun gameplay. King Gambit kind of shits the bed. Now, King Gambit is kind of like the absolute last resort, push the nuclear bomb button if you need to, because this Pokemon's ability, Supreme Overlord, allows it to just essentially reverse sweep your opponent. It has the potential. Now, obviously, there got to be certain conditions you got to think about. But when you're using this ability in Tatum with terrestrialization, you can fool your opponent. And I think the problem with King Gambit is that it comes down to the end game plan. And believe me, I've lost a lot of end games. I've lost games in general by a really dumb King Gambit because I predicted the wrong Terra typing, or I over predicted my opponent Terra typing, and it just completely goes left and I end up losing the game because now the game's out of my hand. And is it really a skill of you over predicting your opponent? No. Is it a skill where your opponent has leverage because they know the Terra typing of King Gambit yet you don't? I don't believe it's completely fair. If I knew what the Terra typing is, which is something, the tier leaders are looking at, would it make me, prepare my game plan more when it comes to the end game? Yeah, sure. But this Pokemon right now, it's the most annoying to deal with. I mean, I'm going to show a replay here as well. And so there you have it. So actually, we both have King Gambits on both sides of the field. Now, I'm using more of a Trick Room team here because I think King Gambit benefits a lot from not worrying about speed for the a built-in Trick Room team. But look at King Gambit's initial matchup. It's not going to do well against Torkoal because Torkoal is just fat as hell defensively. Walking Away can take a hit from King Gambit and it can obliterate me in a sun boosted flamethrower. Great Tusk is like the best counter against King Gambit, but of course you'll see later on in the game that that's not really the case. Then you got Roaring Moon, which can annihilate it as well. Then you got opposing King Gambits that tend to have a low kick for the 1v1 matchup. That's something you got to think about as well. And then Heatran, of course, annihilates King Gambit. But you're about to see more of an end game. Again, I'm going to skip the turns here because I don't think it really matters here. But I'm setting up my King Gambit to be really good, especially when my opponent made the mistake of having this Torkoal weekend. And then I'm just going to start playing games with my opponent because I got to win this game. I'm in the 1600s or 1500s at this point. So, just getting my opponent's team's weekend, like for example, Heatran being gone means that King Gambit can start putting in a little bit of work, but there's still a Great Tusk that we got to deal with here. And we get rid of Torkoal, which is really nice. So now it's going to come down to the more offensive Pokemon. Now, at this point in time, I cannot really set up Trick Room due to the fact that, we're saying this Walking Wake is going to obliterate the rest of my team here. So you see this Hydro Stream just do 81%. Then I get up the Trick Room. And then I got to go sack a Pokemon here because I cannot afford to lose the, my Great Tusk nor the King Gambit here. So I go for the close combat. It does not kill, unfortunately. So obviously my opponent is just straight up going to Hydro Stream here. And because I have Trick Room, now it's a good time to get the King Gambit in. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, I attack because I got to attack what's in front of me, right? I got one turn of Trick Room remaining after this attack. What's the Pokemon my opponent is going to go into? Great Tusk, because my opponent thinks I only have Katal Cleave, Swords Dance, Sucker Punch, and Iron Head. Obviously, even with, the Fallen 4 stat I have here, it's not going to completely kill a Great Tusk, especially if it gets a +1 defense due to photosynthesis. So we get to obliterate the Walking Wake here. And obviously now my opponent can obviously destroy me in one hit. I cannot destroy this Great Tusk in one hit because Great Tusk, again, is one of the best counters to King Gambit. So and now it's going to come down to whether or not I can prevent my opponent from taking my King Gambit away. Essentially, King Gambit is my win con because if this goes down, my Slowking loses to Roaring Moon and the Great Tusk. However, my opponent does not know, and obviously I haven't revealed my Terra typing yet. They don't know that I'm Terra Flying, and they don't know that I have potentially a Terra Blast. King Gambit with Terra Blast is just nasty. Absolutely disgusting. The reason why King Gambits are often Fairy or Flying, which I think Flying is far superior, is due to the fact that it basically invalidates the stab moves from Great Tusk outside of potentially Ice Spinner, but not really important. So then I go for the Terra Flying here, and I go for the Terra Blast and straight up murders because, again, I'm getting the stab boost, super effective, and I still got one turn of Trick Room left, which is pretty cool. And then my opponent has a Roaring Moon. They got an attack boost, and now my opponent is stuck in a very nasty predicament. It's whether they have to Dragon Dance and hope that I just SD here. They already used their Terra, so I know I can just straight up attack this without any, recoil. They kind of have to attack me. So obviously they go for the crunch here. It only does 38, even with a +1 attack, because King Gambit has max HP. It can take the hit. But unfortunately, Terra Blast just straight up does this 78, which is crazy attack. So now, obviously, because the sun's gone, now the Roaring Moon has to rely on me baiting myself into the Sucker Punch game. Is this Pokemon going to attack me? Or is it just going to set up Dragon Dances? My opponent here has to set up a Dragon Dance in order to actually do any damage. Because I know it's Crunch, Dragon Dance. Most likely it's either Earthquake or Crunch or Acrobatics. At this point, since I know the Crunch in the sun only did 38, I can attack this for a game. So my opponent goes for, the boost and attack. It doesn't work with the Dragon Dance because it's not going to do too much damage. I think my opponent kind of misplayed. I think they probably didn't realize that their booster energy popped off because even though Crunch did 38, maybe at +1 more in attack might have killed me, but it had to be a crit. So they probably had to rely on a crit, and obviously I can just attack. So there you have it. The most annoying Pokemon to deal with for me personally is King Gambit, all due to the fact that the Terrassalization and the Sucker Punch mind game with the potential reverse sweep mind game as well is this Pokemon might be a little too much. Do I think it deserves to get banned? No, but I do think a suspect test might be a little fair just to see what the people have to say. But anyways, guys, that's my list. Let me know what you think about it. Go ahead and like, subscribe to support me for free. It's your boy Franklin, signing out. Peace.